"What I'm about to share," he once said, "isn't a theory, it's a memory." Andrew Basiago doesn't look like a time traveler. He doesn't sound like a man who's been to Mars or who claims he watched the Gettysburg Address in person. He's a former lawyer, a trained historian, and for most of his adult life, an ordinary citizen. But his testimony, delivered calmly, repeatedly, and with astonishing detail, has placed him at the center of one of the most bizarre claims in modern memory. According to Basiago, he wasn't recruited into a government experiment. He was selected, as a child, for a program called Project Pegasus, a secret DARPA initiative in the 1970s designed to test teleportation and time travel through classified quantum technology. Between the ages of 7 and 12, he says, he was trained to step through portals, devices that folded time and space, and sent to other places, other times, and possibly other realities. He speaks not in maybes, but in timelines. He remembers arriving in 1863, standing among the crowd as Abraham Lincoln spoke. He recalls moments in the future, buildings that don't yet exist, cities no one's built. He claims he met Barack Obama in the 1980s, long before the name meant anything to anyone. These memories aren't told like fiction. They're recounted like childhood stories, filled with details that are either the product of madness or something else entirely. Critics dismiss him, of course. They call it delusion, a long game for attention. But here's the strange part. He's not the only one. There are others, dozens of them, who've described similar experiences, often without knowing each other. Some speak of lost memories that came back later. Others of brief slips into worlds just slightly off, like waking up in a room where everything's 1 inch to the left. Basiago, for all his outrageous claims, has never wavered. He even ran for President of the United States in 2016, not to win, but to expose the truth. Whether you believe him or not is almost irrelevant, because what matters is this: Andrew Basiago is not speaking in metaphors. He believes with full sincerity that he has been there, beyond the edge of what we call real. And maybe, just maybe, that makes him the most important witness we've forgotten. In the shadows of Cold War paranoia, while the world fixated on missiles and spies, something else, far stranger, was allegedly taking place. According to Andrew Basiago, Project Pegasus wasn't science fiction. It was a government reality, hidden in plain sight. A secret operation under DARPA, America's Advanced Defense Agency, designed to explore teleportation, time travel, and dimensional displacement. The technology, he claims, didn't come from the future, it came from the past. The core method was based on the work of Nikola Tesla. After Tesla's death in 1943, it's said that government agents seized his private papers. Within them, theoretical blueprints for machines that could bend space-time, devices that could open portals, not just to other places, but to other timelines. Imagine reality like a rug, tightly woven with threads of time. Most of us walk along a single thread, our own. But Pegasus, Basiago says, had learned how to twist the rug, fold it over, and step between the threads, like flipping a page in a book before finishing the last sentence. Children were chosen intentionally because they adapted better to the stress of these experiments. Adults would get sick, disoriented, even mentally fractured. But children, Basiago claims, could be trained, conditioned to leap between locations, moments, and sometimes into versions of Earth that didn't quite match the one they left. He wasn't alone. He speaks of meeting other child participants, dozens, many he names. Some, he says, never returned the same. Others, he insists, are still alive, silent under government pressure. And here's where it gets more complex. He describes different types of transport, chronovisors, which allowed observers to view other points in time like watching a movie, plasma tunnels, used for physical travel, and the most disturbing, teleport pads that seem to tear the traveler into particles and reassemble them elsewhere. To most, it sounds like pure fantasy. But some fragments of his story echo details found in declassified documents, particularly those surrounding early Cold War experiments like the Philadelphia experiment and MK Ultra, projects that were once denied until they were proven true. And beyond the bizarre tech lies the question, why? What was the purpose of all this? Basiago says it wasn't just about exploration. It was about mapping the future, understanding timelines, selecting outcomes, and perhaps preparing for contact with civilizations beyond our own. He claims he saw a future where humanity had expanded to Mars, a future where the Earth had changed, where governments had fractured, and some elites had already begun colonizing distant worlds or alternate versions of our own. Too impossible? Too insane? Maybe. But the more you study Project Pegasus, the more it feels like a puzzle where some pieces do fit. Not perfectly, but just enough to make you wonder what the rest of the image might reveal. And Basiago, he remains convinced that Pegasus was just the beginning. A doorway, he says, to a truth so large, the world wasn't ready to see it. If Andrew Basiago's story were an isolated case, it might be dismissed as fantasy. But it's not. Across decades, continents, and cultures, others have stepped forward with chillingly similar tales. Stories of people who vanished, briefly or permanently, into strange realities. Worlds that seemed familiar, but were unmistakably different. Take Miriam Golding, 1934. She enters an elevator in a downtown Chicago building and never makes it to her floor. Moments later, she finds herself in an unfamiliar train station. Its signs, written in a language she doesn't recognize, the architecture unlike anything in the city. Confused and frightened, she walks for hours until she stumbles back onto a familiar street, only to discover that a day has passed. No one believes her, but she's not alone. She mentions a boy she met, also lost, also searching. He, too, vanished shortly after. Another case, Carol Chase McElhaney, 2006. She's driving to a funeral near Riverside, California, a town she knew like the back of her hand. But something's wrong. The streets are oddly quiet. The houses don't look quite right. Styles, colors, placements, all subtly off. She searches for familiar landmarks. Her grandmother's house? Gone. The cemetery where her relatives are buried? Doesn't exist. The street names are the same, but nothing else is. She doesn't stop. Terrified, she drives out of the city and checks into a motel. The next morning, she returns, and Riverside is exactly as she remembers, as if she'd driven through a mirror version of her hometown. And then there's the man from Taured, 1954, Tokyo's Haneda Airport. A suited man arrives from Europe with a passport issued by the nation of Taured. Customs officers are confused. It doesn't exist. But his passport looks real. Stamps, visas, even currency from several countries, all authentic. He insists his country lies between France and Spain. When shown a map, he becomes angry, confused, saying Taured had existed for over 1,000 years. He's detained in a secure hotel room overnight. Guards posted at the door. By morning, he's gone. No sign of escape. All documents vanish with him. These aren't fairy tales. These are documented stories appearing in newspapers, witness interviews, and police reports, and they all share unsettling patterns. Places that almost but not quite, match known geography. People who remember different versions of history, time gaps, missing hours, or entire days. Some return, others don't. Some speak of hearing strange mechanical sounds before the shift. Others feel a sudden sense of weightlessness or a drop in pressure, like stepping off a curb in the dark. The most disturbing commonality: many of them describe the experience not as a dream, but as more real than anything they've ever known. Skeptics argue these are delusions, tricks of memory, or stress-induced hallucinations. But the consistency is unnerving. It's as if these individual S had briefly stepped out of the script of their lives into another play running on a nearby stage. And when they returned, if they returned, the world had moved on as if nothing had happened. Imagine this. You're standing at a fork in the road, left or right? You choose left. But what if, in another version of reality, you chose right? What if both paths happened, just in separate worlds? This is not science fiction. It's one of the boldest ideas in modern physics. It's called the many worlds interpretation, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III in 1956. And it changes everything. Let's start with quantum mechanics. At the tiniest level, smaller than atoms, particles don't behave like solid objects. They exist in a cloud of possibilities. They spin and move in multiple directions at once until we observe them. Then suddenly, they choose one state. This is called the collapse of the wave function. And for decades, scientists believed our observation caused it. In other words, reality only locks in when we look. But Everett said, no collapse, no single outcome. Instead, he suggests that every possibility actually happens, each in its own parallel universe. In Everett's view, the universe splits at every quantum event. Flip a coin. In one universe it lands heads, in another, tails. Now imagine this happening billions of times per second everywhere. It's not just coins, it's choices, accidents, discoveries, even entire histories. Some versions of Earth may be almost identical to ours. Others may be wildly different. Different governments, different geography. Maybe even a world where Taured exists, or one where Carol McElhenney's Riverside really did grow up without her family in it. At first, Everett's idea was dismissed. Too radical, too impossible to test. But over the years, physicists like Bryce DeWitt, Max Tegmark, and Sean Carroll revisited it. Why? Because quantum math actually supports it. In fact, many worlds may be the simplest explanation for how particles behave. And if it's true, then these strange testimonies of people in the wrong town, the wrong year, the wrong reality are not so far-fetched. They're not fantasy. They might be glitches in a multiverse. So next time you feel déjà vu, or remember something that never happened, or swear a detail in history used to be different, maybe, just maybe, you're brushing against the edges of another world. If people really are slipping into parallel realities, if their memories aren't just dreams or delusions, then here's the question that no one dares to ask. Why don't we hear more about it? And more importantly, who benefits from keeping it quiet? Think about it. These cases do surface, briefly. They appear in obscure books, fringe websites, forgotten TV segments. But then, like the people in the stories, they vanish. Try searching for Miriam Golding in official archives. You'll find almost nothing in official archives. Look up Project Pegasus, and you're drowned in blogs and speculation. But no institutional trace, no government file, no confirmation. It's like the trail has been wiped clean, as if the stories are allowed to exist, but never to be taken seriously. The same goes for the science behind it all. Physicist Hugh Everett III who first proposed the many worlds interpretation in 1956, was dismissed for decades. His idea that every quantum event creates a new reality was too radical. Now, that very theory is being quietly explored in elite circles. At CERN, at DARPA, in quantum labs you'll never hear about on the news. But it's not framed as something that could explain people getting lost in parallel worlds. It's sanitized, technical, buried in jargon. The core idea is there, but its implications are stripped of power. Instead, we're fed the fantasy version, TV shows, comic books, sci-fi blockbusters. They flood our minds with the concept of parallel universes, so that when someone claims it really happened to them, we laugh. Or worse, we just shrug. The truth becomes a trope. Real experiences are labeled fiction by design. It's a brilliant trick, and a powerful one. Ask yourself, if people were really crossing between dimensions, if the government was really involved, wouldn't this be the biggest story in human history? Yes, which is exactly why it can't be. Because if it is real, it challenges everything we think we know about physics, about reality, and about how small and fragile our world really is. Some people return from these experiences, but they never really come back. They walk the same streets, sleep in the same beds, live among us. But something is different. They've seen the edges of the map. And now, nothing feels stable. Carol Chase McElhaney couldn't look at her hometown the same way again. Because what if it wasn't the same? The man from Taured vanished without a trace. But his story remained like a splinter in the mind of history. Andrew Basiago, whether he told the truth or not, he believed it with a clarity that unnerved even skeptics. The way a soldier talks about a war that no one else admits ever happened. Once you glimpse a reality outside your own, everything else becomes less real by comparison. People often ask, why would someone make up such a strange story? But maybe the better question is, why would someone ruin their reputation unless they couldn't stay silent? These individuals are not trying to convince the world, they're trying to reconcile their own reality. To tell their story is not to be believed. It's to survive the psychological fallout of knowing something that most people can't afford to believe. We are trained to think of reality as a sealed box. But these cases suggest otherwise. A door doesn't have to stay open long, just long enough for someone to slip through, and when they return, if they return, they carry with them the weight of another existence. Sometimes that weight breaks them, sometimes it awakens them, but it never lets them rest. This episode isn't meant to prove anything. It's an invitation not to believe blindly, but to ask boldly, what if even a fraction of these stories were true? What would it mean for our understanding of memory, science, space, time, and identity? Do your own research. Follow the names. Trace the strange gaps in official history. Ask questions, especially the ones that make people uncomfortable. Because truth doesn't hide in the light. It hides in the places where logic trembles, and fantasy sounds just a little too familiar.